Greetings from Tooele, Utah, where you're catching me on one of the most exciting days of my life. That's because I have over here a 2005 Ford GT, the old one, which has become an icon and developed sort of a cult-like status. And over here I have a 2017 Ford GT, the new one, which is one of the most highly anticipated cars going on the market soon. And today I'm going to drive them both and compare them. I'll start with the basics. The new Ford GT makes 647 horsepower for its turbocharged V6. It weighs just a little over 3,000 pounds. It'll do 216 miles per hour, and it does 0 to 60 in something like 3.2 seconds. The old Ford GT uses a 550 horsepower supercharged V8. It weighs around 3,500 pounds. It does 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds. It has a 6-speed manual transmission, and it'll hit 205 miles an hour. So how do they compare? Well, first, I'm going to take you on a complete tour of these cars, both inside and out. For a more complete look at the new Ford GT, click the link below to check out autotrader.com/oversteer, where I've created an entire review just dedicated to this car and a separate video. And you'll also find more of my thoughts about this comparison in my column on Oversteer. Now, time for the tour. I'll start with a look outside, where one thing becomes obvious the moment you set eyes on both cars. The old Ford GT has a retro look with softer, more beautiful lines, while the new one is more savage and more brutal. The old one is meant to evoke the old race car and make people smile, while the new one doesn't really care what you think. It's angry. Look, for example, at the rear end. The old one is very cool, and it's a great modern interpretation of the 1960s design, but look at the new one. It looks like a rocket ship trying to take off. It's not beautiful, but it's also not intended to be. It looks way more functional. It's the same story up front. The old one is cool, very distinctive, very handsome, very retro. The new one is just grrr. Looks like it's ready to attack. The new one has also been modernized in some other important ways. Check out the headlights of the old model compared to the newer, more advanced headlights of the new one. Also, it's impossible to miss those crazy flying buttresses that will go down as a famous design element of the new one. The old Ford GT doesn't even have anything close. But the changes haven't all been good. The old Ford GT's doors may have been annoying with their weird roofs, but I always kind of thought they were cool. The new model's butterfly doors are certainly less distinctive. And the coolest part about the old GT's design was always the massive hood in back that opened up to reveal literally everything, including the structure of the car and the tires. The new one's hood opening is a little pipsqueak by comparison. Inside, things are also radically different. The old Ford GT's retro seats with holes in them are gone, replaced instead by more modern racing seats. In the dashboard, the old GT's famous old switches and gauges are gone. The gauges are replaced by a highly advanced digital gauge cluster in the new model that laughs at the original GT's old school gauges, while the switches are replaced by, well, an unbelievably advanced steering wheel with 18 different buttons and 2 dials. That's a huge upgrade over the old Ford GT's steering wheel, which was really simple by comparison. The old GT had its climate control buttons in the center console. Those have been moved to the dashboard, right next to Ford's latest Sync infotainment system. That's also something the old GT didn't have. The new GT also has a few buttons in between the 2 seats. Another big difference is the quality of materials. The old GT borrowed too much cheap switchgear from other Ford models, like the turn signal stock, the wiper stock, the window switches, the mirror controls, and more. The new model is much better about that. But the biggest difference between the 2 interiors is size and comfort. The old one was larger and more comfortable inside for longer trips. The new one feels more like a tight race car cockpit. Actually, that isn't the biggest difference. The biggest difference is this thing in the middle in the old Ford GT compared to this thing in the middle in the new one. So that's a look at the new GT and the old GT inside and out. But to add another level of GT versus GT commentary, I'm going to take them both out on the road. It's so funny how instantly I just feel like some of these cars are hard to get a sense of. This one, you just instantly, you can tell. It's not stiff, which is surprising because of what we're in. You just feel like you're not driving something insane. Right. You could get lulled. See, I wonder if that's how some of these accidents happen. If you drive it around normally for a while, you could sort of get lulled into thinking, well, this is a pretty normal car. Right. And then you're in a tree. Downshift's so easy. The clutch is just so easy to operate. In some cars, I'm so nervous about downshifting, and I don't even attempt like some sort of rev match deal. Oh, right. Boy, that's so sweet going around. It feels so precise. The steering is so good. It is not as precise as like a 488 or a brand new car. Modern cars, I mean, that's what happens, right? In 10 years, things change and things move on, and they're a little bit better. But this car still doesn't feel outclassed. I still don't feel like it's oh, I can't believe it drives this bad, you know, like that. Like the Viper does feel outclassed. Power just is so smooth.
Very linear.
Very linear. The pedals are so easily workable. There's a lot of room down there, which you can't always say about mid-engine exotic cars. You don't have to make weird compromises in this car.
So I talked to the development guys when this car was being built, and they talked about all those compromises. The narrow footwell because of the suspension design, and the impossible clutch replacement because the engine's got to come out from a mid-engine car, and they didn't want any of that.
Yeah, I'm blown away by how smooth it is to drive. Not that the ride is good, but just that like it's not rumbly and rough, and you think it would be. Everything works, and it works well. It's just the gear situation, the clutch pedal is just so easy, and in most exotic cars you just can't say that. I also just love it's just around the curves. It's so planted that there's just very little body roll, virtually none, and especially it's a Ford. It's a 12-year-old Ford. Should we do this? Nice car. Yeah.
Just had to one up the guy. That guy's in Salt Lake City with his Mustang Cobra. He's
got the best car.
He's been
the coolest guy
in this town for probably 6 years, and you just destroyed him. I hope you're happy.
It was too good an opportunity to pass up, I think. The first thing you realize is the sound is just fantastic. The transmission is quite quick, even in normal mode. Handling is just next level precise. On the level of every exotic car I've ever driven, the sound is just amazing. Oh! I've never driven anything that feels this precise and this glued to the road as this car. This is unbelievable. I'm gonna floor it very briefly. Oh my God! This thing is world class. It is very impressive. I am blown away. Now, compared to the old one, I gotta say, this is a much more serious car. The old one is a beautiful drive. It's amazing. It's a lot of fun. It's wondrous to shift the gears, and it feels so nice and all that. This thing is brutal. It's a completely different experience. It actually, their styling is sort of perfectly encapsulated in their driving experience. The old one is sort of beautiful and wonderful and excellent, and you look at it and you smile. And this thing, you look at it and it looks daring and brutal, and that's what it feels like. I'm driving on a normal street here, and it feels like a fairly normal experience with the exception that we're really, really low. It is a little loud, there's no question about that. Even kind of at lower RPMs, it's got more of a noise to it. The thing about this car also is it's just very cool to drive. I love the interior of this car. It isn't cheap, it's just kind of basic. You have to realize though that this is not a touring car. You can buy a 488, California, whatever. They've put a lot of effort into stitching quality and choose which stitching you want and which leather you want and which, this isn't one of those cars. This car is actually going to be designed for people who really want to use it for performance purposes. It is just massively fast. Just crazy. I mean, it certainly feels faster than your car. Do you agree? Part of it is the gear changes are just so instantaneous. When I'm driving myself in your car, I can't do anything. I can't do it like this.
When you drive my car, and the transmission works extremely well on my car. The shifter is extremely friendly and easy to use. When you drive my car, even if it's just for a half of a second, you get a break from brutal acceleration.
And in this car,
there's no break.
There's no break.
It's
you never get
constant.
it. That's a great point.
One wall of torque that keeps pushing your head backwards.
Yeah. But while I'm just an idiot who's driven these things for a few minutes in Utah, I need expert help for a real comparison. And so this is Carl. Now, Carl supervises my colleagues at Auto Trader. And most importantly, this is his Ford GT. He's driven almost 30,000 miles, and he drove it 700 miles from Southern California to get here. He's also on the list for the new one. And as a result, Carl knows a lot more about these things than I do. So let's talk GT. Tell me about your drive up here in this one.
Well, you know, it was the most brutal weather I've dealt with yet on this car. It's been in rain, but this time I got a little hailstorm. And in a matter of seconds, the highway turned white from little beads of hail. And don't forget, this car has no traction or stability control. So, you know, you do something stupid and things could go very, very wrong. But what's nice about this car is if you don't do something stupid, it treats you like, a very dependable friend.
You're not worried about driving it in that kind of weather and that sort of thing?
Doug, cars are meant to be driven. And for every person who sticks them under glass and never takes them out of their garage, I'm trying to counteract that by driving a car like this and actually enjoying it. You drive a car, it might get wet.
Right. 30,000 miles is a lot for one of these. People don't think it's a 12-year-old car, but actually that's a ton. If you go on Auto Trader right now, you won't find a 30,000 mile car. That'd be the highest. Have you heard of people doing more than that? Anybody daily this?
There's a guy in Seattle who's got one with 140,000 miles.
140,000 miles.
Ford GT with 140,000.
What has the service, maintenance, repair situation been like for this one?
It's almost hard to recall because there's so little to report.
You haven't had problems though. Engine-wise, reliability has been good. You feel comfortable. You're going to drive it home tonight, presumably.
Yeah.
You feel comfortable.
I'm trying to beat the snow tonight and drive it potentially at least half those 700 miles
and
back.
you turn on, you just drive. You don't.
Yeah.
You're not worried about it.
No, this car has never stranded me. It's never given me a problem. I've tracked it. I've driven it to Denver and back from Los Angeles. I call it a Mustang with bad rear visibility, meaning whatever faith you would put in a 5-liter Mustang as far as how careful you got to be with it, how you got to treat it so it doesn't break, that's how careful you got to be with that.
Let's talk about the new one. Are you excited for this thing?
I'm hugely excited. It's a little pricey, as you may know. I think you might mention at some point in your video that this car is a little more expensive even than this car. And I have wrestled honestly with whether I should really get the car. Even after I was allotted one, I was like, gosh. I think today pretty much sealed the deal. The car has got so much capability. This car is like a trusted friend by now. 12 years, 30,000 miles, and it's never let me down. And it's beautiful.
Yeah, we should mention you bought this car new. You actually purchased the car new in 2005.
7 miles on it when I got it in August of 2005. So I feel like this car has kind of become a part of me.
Do you think that's going to happen with this one?
That's a question that I don't have an answer to yet. This is a race car, and it really isn't meant to be driven quite as far as this one has been driven. But I think if I can find uses for this car at the same level that I found for this car, I think I might end up having the same bonding with it.
Do you think you could do a 700-mile road trip, in one of these? You think you'd leave tonight on a 700 miles driving this car?
I would. I mean, if the Ford guy said right now, you know what, we need this press car in LA, and we'll pay to ship your car back. If you're willing to drive this one back, I'd be like,
done.
Bye, guys.
Last question. Are you preparing yourself for the fact that every car person you meet for the rest of time will ask you, which one do you like better?
Something I wasn't prepared for, but you might imagine happened. Guess what question I was asked about 800 times in the first 24 hours after this car debuted at the Detroit Auto Show? So are you going to get a new one?
You're going to get a new one? So now they know you're going to get one, and now you got to be ready. Which one do you like better? Which is your favorite?
And I'm going to enjoy finding out. And I do look forward to having the cars back to back and seeing which one resonates with me more. This one's built up a pretty good equity with me. Can this one at all displace it? Can this emotionally, psychologically start to push this one aside?
Right.
We'll know in a few years.
All right, well, thank you, Carl. And now we're going to get your expert opinion behind the wheel. Carl's going to drive these two cars and give us some interesting perspective on the old and new Ford GT experience. So how many miles we got on this thing right now?
29,695.
It looks like they hailed it in
No, it was like, I call it couscous sized tail. It was relatively small, thankfully, and it made a lot of noise. And I'm thinking, well, no traction, no stability. I'll be fine.
Yeah, nice summer tires on this thing.
Summer race tires. And this car to me is a sweetheart. Plenty of these cars get wrecked. If there was a flaw in these cars, it was the original Goodyear Eagle F1 tires that are almost what I would call dangerous. Zero traction when they're cold, and just above zero traction when they're not cold. Anyone who has owned one for a while and experienced both tires knows, get those Goodyear Eagle F1s off as soon as
presumably,
possible.
Because so many of these were collectible, there's a lot of them running around on original.
They're mostly, I'm sure most of the 4038 they made are still running around those because you got all the OCD guys who don't want to change anything. Getting in and out is weird because of the doors, as we all know, and we sit really low. The car's only 43.5 inches tall. Tall people have an inseam that can be like 35 inches,
right.
So, and this one's 43.
That's a great point. So you've had this car, bought it new.
Bought it new, 7 miles, Santa Monica Ford delivered it. When they showed this car as a concept at the 2002 Detroit Auto Show, I went through the trouble to fight my way through the crowd down to see the car on the floor of the Cobo Arena because it was such a cool car. And my first thought was, wow, that's awesome. I wish Ford could make this, but they're having such interesting financial situations right now in the early 2000s. That won't happen, but boy, it would sure be neat. And then 2 months later, less, they announced it for production. And all I could think was, this is the 71 Hemi Cuda convertible of my generation. The first time I drove it, I was like, and this sounds terrible to say, but this is what I thought. I drove it and my first thought was, oh my God, it's gonna be good too. And that sounds terrible because basically what I'm saying is I didn't have a lot of faith that it would actually be this incredible car that would be engineered in a way that would make you
prefer driving it over an equivalent Ferrari. You know?
05 Ford was making, the Freestar, right? How could they have built a good car?
Well, I mean, again, and again, the U.S. had tried their kind of semi-exotic thing. It was called a Dodge Viper, and there's nothing terribly wrong with the Dodge Viper, but it's not like this super precise, refined, capable machine. I thought it would be like a Viper. Yes, I did.
And so did I.
And it's not, is it?
Not at all.
It's not at all like a Viper. It's like a Ferrari that doesn't break down and cost a lot of money every 800 miles when you take it in. That's what it's like. Remember, we were sitting in my car, and you could barely get both of us in the shot at the same time?
Yeah, that's so funny.
An advantage of the GT.
Look how close we are in that shot. I mean, I could move a little over, and so could you, but not mine.
Yeah, it's not like the 2005 car is remotely sloppy, but this car is super precise. I think that's the first thing I realized within 10 feet of driving this car. It's a race car that has been tamed for the street. My car was a street car from day one. It was paying homage to a very famous race car, but it wasn't ever supposed to compete and win races like Le Mans, which this car already has done.
Yeah.
Now, what's really fascinating about this car is you have it in normal mode, like we've got now, and it's a super friendly, easy to drive car. Suspension isn't beating you up or anything. You put it in just sport mode. That's all you do. You don't even go to track or VMAX, just go to sport. And you can instantly tell a difference. The big difference you really notice, to me at least, is the fact that they keep the turbos spinning.
So the throttle response.
So there is no lag time. You roll on the throttle, and it's instantaneous. Boom, you're gone. You've got a V6 turbocharged engine in a supercar. I'm gonna be like, my first thought's like,
right.
Which is a lot of people. A lot of people feel that way about this car. They're not sure. Oh, I don't know, man. No 8-cylinder. Let's pretend you didn't know what the car was equipped with, and you just got in it to drive it for the first time, and you're Mr. V8 or die kind of guy. What are you gonna think when you floor it and this happens?
Right. Are you actually gonna be disappointed?
Who's going to be disappointed in that, no matter how snobbish you are about cylinder count?
What do you think of the interior in this thing compared to yours?
I love it. I love the interior. First of all, the interior was one of the areas of my car that couldn't get done with as much finesse as they normally would have. So they really kind of had to rush through the interior design of the car to make sure that it just got out in time. And you can sense it. You drive my GT and it drives great. But you look around its interior, you see a lot of shared componentry with other Fords. The material quality isn't always the greatest. This car, you can tell that they were able to put in a serious amount of time on the interior.
Yeah.
Everything is very form follows function.
What do you think about this steering wheel? It's pretty crazy.
I'm wondering how long it's going to take before it's intuitive to find the buttons.
What about sound? You into the sound? You think it's good?
The sound is the biggest variation on my car in terms not of tonal quality. It sounds great, but in terms of volume. This is a loud car, okay? You are constantly hearing that engine behind you, more so than the engine behind me in the GT.
This is louder than the old one.
Yeah, this is louder than
my... You think it's good? You think it's a good sound? You like this?
I have no problem with this sound. The sound does not bother me. The only thing I would say is the volume's a little higher. Now, if you put it back in normal and you get it into 7th gear and you're cruising at 70 miles an hour, it's pretty livable. If you're looking for a way to describe this car versus, my car, for instance, again, race car turned street car, still has race car behavior.
Yeah.
My car never had race car behavior because it was never supposed to be a race car.
So there you go. That's everything you wanted to know about the new Ford GT and the old Ford GT from me and also from someone who knows them pretty well. And remember, you can get a much more thorough look at the new GT and all of its crazy quirks and cool features if you watch my video review of this car specifically, which is linked in the description below. And for more of my thoughts on the old GT, you can watch my video review of an old GT I did a few months ago, which is also linked in the description below. This is a Cimarron.
Look at that. We've got the coolest
and the worst American cars.
There's a portrait in contradiction there.
What a vehicle.
Cadillac Cimarron and the Ford GT. How to properly pay homage to a brand and how to not properly pay homage.
That man is the original owner of that thing. He and you are both original owners. You got to get together and talk about what it's like to keep a car
from. To own an American